Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Relative Pitch. Today, we are so excited to have with us Dr. Travis Cross. He is the professor of music and director of bands at the UCLA. Hello, Dr. Cross. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm great. Wonderful to be with y'all.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I remember we were talking about who we wanted on, and it was just like, of course, we have to have you on. So I'm just glad that we made it out because we know you're always booked and busy. Because we always say it on the podcast, being booked and busy, and you are the true definition of that. So I'm just so glad we had time to do this today.
Booked and busy and blessed.
Amen. Book busy and blessed. That's gonna be the third B, y'all. That's
right.
Third B. Like so, Dr. Cross, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from, where you go to school, and how did you get to UCLA today?
Great. So I'll do this super fast. I was born in Korea, adopted at the age of 4 months, grew up in Iowa, a suburb of Des Moines. And lived there, through high school. Ankeny High School is where I went to school, which is a terrific music program, band program in the state of Iowa. I did my undergrad at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. Student taught at Anoka High School, which at the time was the biggest high school in Minnesota, another terrific program, and taught for 4 years at Edina High School in the suburbs of Minneapolis. It touches Minneapolis on the southwest corner. Terrific school district, really fine band program. I was the associate director there for 4 years. After that, I went to grad school at Northwestern, go Cats, in Evanston, where I did my master's and stayed for my doctoral coursework. Left after 2 years after finishing my coursework and qualifying for candidacy. And then I taught for 5 years at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, where I was assistant professor of music, wind ensemble conductor. During those 5 years, close to the end of those 5 years, I finally finished my paper and finished my degree and stopped paying continuation fees. And then after 5 years at Virginia Tech, I started at UCLA, and I'm currently in my 10th year at UCLA and approaching my first ever sabbatical after 15 years as a college teacher.
Oh, wow.
Is that fast enough?
You're good.
Oh, wait, I think I want to make sure I got it right. You did your master's and your coursework for your doctorate in how many years?
Well, 4. 2 years for the master's and then 2 years for the doctorate.
I only heard 2 years, and I was like, he was
I heard that too.
No, that would be not healthy.
I just want to go back to one little part because me and you share something very similar, and not a lot of us share this. But you,
great fashion sense for one, but.
The disrespect on this call.
When I see your fashions and the shoes and all that in LA, I'm like, you know what? That's it. I need to find out where he got that from. Because while you're rocking it out on the West Coast, I'm gonna rock it out on the East Coast.
That's right.
And then I just feel broke in every coast.
So we shared that in undergrad, we were both vocal and instrumental education, and which that is not it is not like a big norm. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I did both activities, really intensely in high school. I was telling kids just yesterday that I spent, my senior year of high school, I had an 8-period day, and I spent 4 periods in the music wing, band, choir, jazz band, show choir. I was also doing independent study, refiling the band library. So I love them both. I did them both. I was pretty sure when I started college that I was going to be a band director. But I enjoyed singing so much, and I was going to St. Olaf College, which has all these choirs and this terrific choral program. So I mean, it was just a few more classes to do that. Some vocal pedagogy, some choral conducting, classes I wanted to take anyway. So I did the double major. I student taught at Anoka High School, which has this tremendous band program and this epic, all galaxy choir program. And one of my classmates was also student teaching. He was student teaching in choir, and he was also vocal and instrumental ed. So the two of us kind of were there together. As there were 3 double majors in my class, vocal, music, instrumental, and so 2 of us were at the same school, and we did a little bit of crossover. I would play congas with the choir, and if there was a free period, I'd kind of go down and watch rehearsal because they were so good, and try to learn as much as possible. I mean, I just think how do I put this? I think that the more you learn about music and the more you learn about teaching, the better you are. And I'm not a wind player, so most of my direct experience with making sound on wind instruments comes from the wind instrument of the voice. And sort of how you move air and how you keep air moving forward, and so I think that helps me be a better band director, I suppose. I don't suppose. I'm not going to apologize for that. I think that being a singer and understanding choral music a little bit helps me be a better band director. So why not?
Absolutely. I've
You feel the same way?
I feel the exact same way, actually. Same thing as you. I couldn't choose between band or choir. I knew that I loved band and I wanted to conduct band, but when I was coming out of high school, it's like I don't know. And the institution that I chose, they said you don't have to. You can come and do both. And I was like, well, I guess you've already signed my name on the dotted line for me then. So it was just good that and luckily at the school that I went to, both sides were just great at making music. So it was just so instrumental for me to be a part to be a part of it. And like you said, you learn so much about being a music teacher in general on both sides. And you see how they like play on each other. Like I remember being in choir rehearsal and I'm like, ooh, that's a great thing that I can take back in the band room. Or in the band, I'm like, ooh, I can take back in the choir, so you learn so much things from that. And I'm glad somebody else have that same energy. I'm so glad somebody else said that. It's good for me.
Mm-hmm. And music is music, I mean, it's maybe 90% of the DNA is in common between all forms of music, whether it's solo performance, whether even popular music, jazz, and classical music. I mean, so much of it is the same, and then there are pedagogies and repertoires and specific approaches and tricks that are different. But I would love to watch some of the best people in our field work with orchestras and work with choirs, and I would love to watch some of the best people who do choirs work with my group. And there would be some things that would be different and challenging, but they're just the knowledge that could be shared would be great.
Yes, I think one thing that I always love to see is the moments where the band and choir, like what is it, the piece Future of Fire. I believe it's a piece where it's band and choir. And I just remember seeing that Columbus State did it years ago. And I was just a music kid geeking out. I was like, oh my gosh, here it is. So it was just a powerful moment. And nowadays, all of our music is kind of being overlapped. Like so many choir pieces are becoming band pieces or the way around. And now composers are doing both. So music is just music. And so we got to go along with that.
And just a brief commercial message to any band director who's doing Omnium Mysterium or Rest or any sort of Sleep, any piece that used to be a choir piece. I mean, just go get the score and look at the text and figure out where they breathe with the text and just I'm done. I'm done of my but I mean, the number of performances you hear of transcriptions of choral music or vocal music, Allerzalen, that it's sort of clear that the conductor never looked at the original version. I would encourage everyone to not put breaths in the middle of words.
Thank you. PSA, please.
Well, PSA to the soloists and chamber musicians who also do that, because I like to steal a lot of the vocal work. So I do this trio of French art songs and stuff. And I was looking at the text one day, and I was working with somebody, or someone was coaching me. They're like, "You need to breathe here because it makes sense for your high note." I'm like, "That's the middle of the word." I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll work out the high notes somewhere later, but I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can't go out in front of these my colleagues who are vocalists, Anthony being one of them, because he will straight get me and do this. So yes, PSA for everybody.
Yes, yes.
I have an interesting question for our like people who are watching who have no idea what a sabbatical is. What is a sabbatical, and why do people do that?
That's a wonderful question. I'll tell you next year. A sabbatical is a period of sort of study leave in higher education, occasionally in public schools, but very rarely. But in higher education, in the olden days, every X number of years, there would be a break where you would not teach. They bring someone else in to do your teaching for you, and then you would focus entirely on your research or on travel or on, most of the times when you apply for sabbatical, you have to have a proposal for some sort of a project that you're going to do. And again, a lot of times they don't call it a sabbatical anymore. They call it study leave or your research leave or that sort of thing. What I've learned about this, I mean, I've known what a sabbatical is since I was in college because we had teachers taking them here and there. But I learned this fairly recently. The etymology of the word sabbatical, it comes from the same root as the word Sabbath, right? And the root word is seven. So Sabbath comes from every 7 days. Sunday or Saturday, previously, you would take a day off. Right. And the other sort of history to the word sabbatical, as I understand it, is that in some sort of Hebrew law, there was a requirement that you leave the fields fallow every 7 years. Which, as we know, allows them to regenerate and regain their nutrients, and then you start planting again. And let's just think about that for a second. The idea that a person in a creative, research, artistic field would every 7 years allow the fields to fallow in order to replenish them for the next 6 years ahead. Wow. There's something there. Now, listen, I know most people don't get to take a year off and just recharge every 7 years in the rest of the world, right? In the real world. And I'm going on year 15, and I've not had a sabbatical. Typically, if you stay in one school, you go 6 years, you get promoted to associate professor, and then after your promotion, you take a sabbatical. And then oftentimes, then 6 or 7 years later, after your promotion to full professor, you take a sabbatical. So generally, it's supposed to sort of time out in that 7-year interval. But, again, here I am. I've gone double that before I'm going to do it for the first time. But there's something human and humane and mindfulness, self-care, all these kind of terms we're talking about now, with taking some time to just unplug and recharge. I think our art would be better. And if you're booked and busy and blessed, sometimes you're also exhausted and not really doing your best work because you're so keyed in all the time, and you don't have the downtime and the reflection time and the self-analysis time and the dreaming time. So I love that you asked that question, Lauren, because learning about what the word itself means gives us some insight into what that time really ought to be. And I was talking to I saw the St. Olaf band play in California this winter, and the college pastor, who's retired now but was the college pastor when I was there, he was narrating Lincoln Portrait, and I was talking about this, and I was mentioning I was about to go on a sabbatical, and I was saying, now listen, I've learned about this Hebrew, and I knew pastor would be into that. And he agreed with me, but he said, but what biblical scholars would say is that it's not just rest after 6 years, but it's rest for the purpose of recharging for the next journey ahead. And so I like that. I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry if I cut you off. The next question I had was sabbatical, because one of my former teachers is taking one now.
Yes.
Are you doing a special project or topic while you're off, or you just like taking this time to recharge and explore the field?
I mean, I mean, I, well, I think when people do this, they generally write a fairly general project. You know, they're going to research this kind of pedagogy,
Yep.
or they're going to, you know, explore this or that. You know, it's not sort of like I'm going to do these 7 things. In this paper, I will prove this. You know, it's not quite that. That's structured. So there is, I think, a little bit of freedom for it to ebb and flow and go as it does. Um, uh, you know, I'm going to try to do a little bit of traveling. I'm going to try to spend, you know, some extended time, maybe a month or so in Korea. You know, just in a way that I couldn't normally because I have a job and I like to do my job. Um, and you know, one of the other things that I put on my list is you know, I'm finishing 5 years as chair of our department, which has been a wonderful experience, learning experience for me. I think I've been able to do some positive things and help the, you know, the greater enterprise. But it's been a huge time suck, and you know, the 2 things that have sort of that I've neglected are really intense time studying scores and time exploring new repertoire. You know, I sort of told myself when I started this that, you know, I'm probably going to repeat more music. I'm probably going to do more music I already know as opposed to learning new music because I'm not going to have the time to dedicate to really getting inside it. And of course, this 5 years that I'm completing coincides with this huge explosion in repertoire, this sort of a new look at how we find repertoire and how we value repertoire, and I just haven't been able to be as engaged in that as I would like to be because I got meetings and emails and spreadsheets. So one of the things that's in my proposal is to take time to, in essence, catch up a little bit,
Yeah.
To learn some of this music, to study some of it, even if I never perform it, to get to know it better, to get to know some of these composers better, and to have a deeper well of music to program when I come back, that I might not have had before, that many of my colleagues have been spending a lot of time the last 3 to 5 years focusing on, boning up on, improving. And I've done a little bit, but I haven't done as much as I would like to do. So hopefully this will give me a little bit more room to do that.
No, I love where this conversation led off to because it kind of goes into something we've been talking about, like within. So with I work within the Seattle Symphony, and whenever you work within an organization that large, that you are thinking about tonight's concert, next week's concert, the month out from now, next year, next season, 10 years from now. And there's this idea, it's this whole thing about, like, you know, when you work, when your passion is your work, or when you work and you do your passion for your work, it's often very easy to get caught up in the, oh, I don't need a day off, or I don't need, you know, time off because I want to do this, right? And there's just a big feeling in general as well about, I need to do this work. And so it's so easy to fall into the traps where you're like, oh, I haven't taken like vacation time in over a year. You know, like it's just something that doesn't happen, but it's so important. And when you were talking about what a sabbatical is supposed to be, this idea of resting and recharging for the future, because it is a benefit when you do stop for a moment and rest and take account for like what you have been doing, reflect, then you can adjust for whatever is going to come forward. You also have time to just sit. And like these two both know, I'm the worst person for calming down and sitting down and just being still because it's hard for me to do.
Mm.
Um, but which I mean, kind of all of us are the same, but I really, yeah. Oh, and Anthony's better. Anthony's better. He's
I will
better.
sit. I will sit.
But it's something that I feel like we have to get into the mindset of being like, it is our passion, but it is also work. And regardless of what it is, we do need time to recharge, to be better than what we were prior to that. And unfortunately, I think sabbaticals, a lot of people in their mind automatically go, oh, I'm going to go record an album. Oh, I'm going to go do this. So it's like not really thinking about the rest aspect of it, but more just like, well, what am I going to get done within this year that I'm not teaching? You know?
You know, I love that. And I want to respond to it in 2 ways. One, I want to talk about briefly about the dichotomy the kind of two sides of what we do in terms of hustle versus patience. And I think I feel this way about changing the field. I feel this because I feel like there are often two sides to everything, and we have to kind of care for both of them. I've never been super radical in terms of like just bam, because I always think there's a lot of, but so I'll talk about that in a second. And the other thing I want to talk about is just the the investment you make in yourself, the investment you make now in yourself in 2 years, in 5 years, because of how you take care of yourself. I don't remember who it was, but I was talking to someone maybe a month ago who described themselves as having an empathy deficit. That because this pandemic, Zoom, the way that lines have blurred between off time and on time, and just all the demands, and then rebuilding things that they feel. And it was either a colleague of mine, or it might have been like someone famous on TV or something, but they feel like they have an empathy deficit. They are faster to get mad at people. They are less patient. They are sort of less the person they want to be, because they're just exhausted. And so, taking that time, however it is, whether it's a Sunday off or whether it's closing the computer at 6 o'clock, or maybe closing the computer at 10 o'clock, finding ways to protect your, what's it say, carved into always of graffiti on the street in Los Angeles, protect your soul. Finding ways to do that allows you to recharge that empathy bank, and to be a better person around other people. I think that so many of us, we've just been going at 11 for since 2020, and a lot of us were going at 11 a couple years before that. So we're not at our best because we're not, the body and mind are not where they need to be. Now, that being said, let's move into this sort of two sides of the coin dichotomy thing. It's Mike Haithcock in Michigan and Gerald Schweibert, who is a actor, movement person there, who talk a lot about the word balancing rather than balanced with a D. The idea being that balancing is a continuous process, and it's not reaching a static point where everything is perfect and remains that way. There is no such thing as balanced. But balancing means we're always kind of moving and adjusting, and balancing might mean sometimes we're a little busier than we want to be, and other times we sort of make up with it by some rest and recovery, and that's what I think is realistic to the human condition. I think if your goal as a 22-year-old first-year high school band director is to find a moment of a point of balance where you can take care of yourself, I mean, it's not realistic, nor should it be. It's not wrong. It's not a flaw in the way the world works that someone who's their first year out of college and their first job is really busy and tired all the time. That's just what it takes to do something new. Now, if you've been doing it for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years and you're still doing it the same way, that's something we got to fix. That's not, or that's a toxic system that doesn't allow people to be successful. If you have to hustle all the time, that's not a place anyone wants to be. But I want to be very clear that I'm not saying no one should ever have to hustle at all. And I'm not saying that people should never be busy. It's just about having that ebb and flow, and making sure that as you ebb or as you flow this way, you never tip over. And that you spend enough time kind of coming back around the middle. So I think we want people to hustle. That's a value. That's an American value. That's an artist value. That's a freelancer. I mean, you have to hustle. You have to kind of get out there and work, and you got to work hard. You got to pour yourself into it, even if it's something you love. You have to work your tail off. So it's not an either or. It's not I am going to take care of my soul and my humanity, or I'm going to work really hard and explore things to put myself into positions where I can have opportunities and succeed. It's just about finding the right ebb and flow between the two. And I think that's true with most things. I think, you look at a grad student who's studying conducting. I mean, these 2 years in a master's degree are the best chance you're going to have to focus on yourself and your ears and your study. But that doesn't mean you should lock yourself in a room and only practice for 2 years. You got to meet people. Oftentimes you've moved to a new place, so there are restaurants and nightlife and concerts and nature and like other sorts of things. So I mean, I don't want a grad student who's going to come to Los Angeles and kind of just take it all in and not practice and not study their scores and not do their scales and not I would think that those 2 years of a master's degree or those 2 or 3 years of a doctorate are going to be probably like 70%, 75% work, 25%, 30% other life. But you're still going to have other life. And I think if someone goes in and does 100% study, read, practice, watch video, and then doesn't, just go sit outside a couple of days, it's not going to work as well either.
Yeah, I love that you said part of the study is also living your life as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in all things, and being a band director, when I was a band director, and speaking with other colleagues that started out at the same time, one of the things that I guess got blurred, going through the curriculum and the education is you are expected to be a band director 100% of the time. There is no room for you to be Anthony or be the person you are because band director takes so much. And I remember telling people now, I'm like, no, that's not true. What makes you special as a teacher, as a band director, is who you are and what life experiences you've been through. That is what makes you a good teacher. That what makes your students see you for who you are, that trust you, that then trust your musical instincts, and that will actually, it'll probably bloom into something very beautiful. The program will be something beautiful because that trust is there. They know who you are. So that kind of misconception of I have to be a band director on this podium, my life is this. That I don't believe that's true. And it might be because I'm in the first stages of my career, but right now, that is my belief system and I'm sticking to it. I don't think that 100% should be dedicated to it because before you became a band director, you were a person. So why now this job equals completely abandoning yourself for this?
And the purpose of art is to express humanity and emotion and belief. So I mean, you got to have something to say. And so it's again, it's not a choice between. It's that one helps the other.
Right.
So the old cheesy saying is that the students don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think that's true. And I also think you need to know stuff. So I mean, please, nobody say, "Oh, Travis Cross said I can just focus on being who I am and not learning my scores." I mean, you got to do both. Mm-hmm. But I do think that I would kind of just put a little spin on what you said, Anthony, which I agree with entirely. But the spin I would put on it is that a band director can be many things. You actually should be a band director, but you don't have to be a band director that looks like the band director you had, or looks like the stereotype of what a band director is. I mean, I think a band director can wear a tie, and a band director cannot wear a tie. A band director can be any gender, ethnicity, orientation, etc. All those things are true. So I think rather than what I would say, and this is a tiny little kind of angle on what you said, but I wouldn't say that I want to not be a band director when I'm on the podium. I would say that I want to expand the definition of what a band director is to include everything I am and everything that everyone who chooses to do the work to be able to do this does as well. I want us to think of band director as something bigger and more inclusive and more expansive than we thought of 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
Absolutely, because I think we talk on this podcast all the time about stereotypes and how a band director, the stereotypical band director 50 years ago, probably I would not be standing in that position just by the factors of who I am. Um, and I remember we always said, well, we're going to change that. Or just a musician in general. When you think of a classical musician, who do you think of? Most times it will not look like some of us that are on this podcast today. So now that we're in 2023 and moving on to the future, let's start changing. Let's expand what a musician, what a band director, what a trumpet professor looks like, acts like. That's another thing is we talk about what people look like, but what about how they act? Or what about, what do they have to say? Different perspectives, different opinions. That's all part of being a musician today. And so let's expand what that looks like. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, and just to get on a little soapbox here too. I mean, I think that I don't want to call it gatekeeping, but I think that there's a tendency to look down on, I don't know, certain millennial behaviors, certain stereotypically female or person of color or LGBTQ, certain ways that people express their identity, and say, well, that's a distraction. That you need to focus on your work, not on that. Listen, I'm saying you need to focus on your work. That's really important. But that if you really sort of analyze it carefully, the time that I might spend going to K-pop concerts isn't that different than the time that someone 20 years ago would have spent golfing. The time that someone who is into fashion spends, doing their fun photo shoots with all their looks and everything, might not really be that different than the amount of time that someone spends raising a child. So now there are a lot of people in my generation, in your generation, who sort of want to have it all without doing the work. That's anyone. I've never raised a child, but I know anyone, fathers and mothers, but especially mothers. That's a ton of work, and they are up studying their scores at 6 a.m. because it's the only time they can. People who are composers with kids, they're writing at 1 a.m. or 5. They are making a sacrifice. They are buying the bonus of having that in their personal life and their professional life. They're buying it at a cost of working longer, harder than other people. And young people today, listen to me, us youths, young people today also have to buy that. It's not free. So if you want to live in a certain way and experience a certain thing, you're going to have to pay that back, by working harder or longer or something some other time. So I'm not saying that you can skate, but I'm just pointing out that a lot of the things that make certain generations sort of roll their eyes and say, well, that's kind of a waste of time, objectively is no more time than the activities that generation did outside of work. It's just they're different. They're different things that people choose to do, and I think that's worth those of us who are older, perhaps now I'm going to age myself. It's worth those of us who are older looking contextually at that and kind of looking back at ourselves as we point the finger at others, to say, well, okay, yeah, I guess I really did. I spent, X hours doing this, and they're doing this instead. Good for them.
Right. I agree.
I want to piggyback on some of this because, Anthony y'all both talked about like the balancing versus the balance. What does this person look like? What does this person look like? And what you were just hitting on is like, sometimes if you want to live a certain way, you have to put in a certain amount of work. And so like, that was my goal coming into this year. This is my first year out of school, because I just went straight through my master's. I'm like, I need X amount of dollars to live in Atlanta because Atlanta is expensive. But what has that come to cost me? And I don't, y'all two don't make faces. That has come to cost me. I drive about 800 miles a week. I don't get home till like 8 or 9. And I have to leave at 8 or 9 in the morning. So it's like, okay, I did the hustle. I was hustling for a whole year. We ain't stopping until June. But how can I optimize my time and my value to these programs going into next year as a freelancer? Okay, can I fit almost all my lessons in one area on one day? Like I'll have a long day on Monday, but Tuesday, Wednesday is short, long day on Thursday, Friday short. Like something like that instead of every single day being long. And it's something I was just like, I say, okay. And like I had big car troubles last week and I was stuck at home for 3 days. And oh my God, I almost went insane. I just could not sit at home. I finally took a walk because I was like, I cannot look at these four walls, and I just didn't even want to take a walk. I'm like, I want my car. I want to go work. Where is my car? And so now I'm just like, I was so stir crazy. I rearranged my room at 2 o'clock in the morning last night. So it's like trying to learn all this stuff that we didn't learn in college. Cause like we in my trumpet studio in undergrad didn't focus on, hey, 1 hour a day, you should probably put music away and do something you like. Hey, this is how you organize your fun life. This is how you do this stuff. And that's what I include in my curriculum. The very first studio class, I make everybody lay out their schedule. Like 1 hour every day, you have to do something fun. One day a week, you don't need to touch the trumpet. You need to make sure all your academic work is in order. You need to make sure this, this, and this. And remember, you have 4 years to accomplish this goal. You ain't got to accomplish it in one semester. And so trying to switch that mindset, because I was in the mindset from freshman year, you have to hustle. And if you don't hustle, you ain't going to make it. And so like trying to switch that mindset, like hustle's a journey, not a sprint.
Yeah, it's a marathon. I mean, three things that makes me think of. See if I can remember them all before I forget. One of them is that you have to reflect. I mean, what you're doing after this year is you're finding a time or a space to say what worked, what didn't, and what am I going to change. So, I mean, I think that's important. That's an essential part of the process. If you just keep doing what you're doing, it doesn't become intentional, it becomes accidental. So just taking the time to say, well, maybe I'm going to do a little less of this or a little more of this, I think that's hugely valuable to everyone. The second thing is, at some point you have to make some choices. You have to figure out what your values are, what your priorities are. And then, maybe I'm going to hustle more in this area, but I'm going to let this one thing go. I'm going to let this thing go that I thought was important, but really it's not as important to me as this other thing. And then you make a choice and you live with it. And that sort of leads into the third thing that your comment made me think about, which one is that everybody's different, and two is that there's no one way to do it and there's no right way to do it. So and those two concepts are tied together. I mean, someone might choose not to get the best job they possibly can in the profession. My God, a trumpet player might decide they don't want to play in a big five orchestra. That might be okay. And it's going to have to be okay for about 99.95% of them, because they're not going to get that anyway. But we listen, I think we should all, I would like every trumpet teacher to sort of aim at getting their students to be able to do that. I think, holding those high ambitions, I think, every master's student in conducting, you want to try to prepare them so that they could someday become a Big Ten director bands or something. I mean, you want to lead with that sort of artistic ambition. But even then, my grad students, some of them want to be a Big Ten director of bands. Some of them just want to be better and don't really care where they end up. Some of them really want to live in place X because that's what's important to them. And they'll take a, less, I'm intentionally putting this quote, less famous job or something so that they can live where they want to live. Someone might prioritize having a family, and so either A, they need to get out quick and get a job and start making money so that they can do that, or it's going to be more important to them that they have a job that has a certain number of hours. I mean, like, all of these things are valid. There is no one right way to be a flutist or to be a conductor or to be a professor. There's no one best kind of institution or best kind of job because each person is going to want to have a different balance of things. Uh, you know, and so as we teach them, I think it's good to teach them that there are lots of different ways to do it. And I think if there is a kid that wants to practice 6 hours a day every day, mazel tov, let's make it happen. I mean, go for it. You know, that's good for them. If that's them, if that's what makes them happy and how they thrive, I love it. What I just don't want to do is, because there is one kid who wants to practice 6 hours a day, expect that everybody's going to want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, if yeah, I think it's important that you have sort of a social life within your studio. And if that involves going out to a bar for happy hour once a week or something, I think that's amazing too and really important. But if you've got a kid that for whatever, you know, for a religious reason doesn't want to drink or something, you want to make sure that they're not in that direction as well, kind of pressured into a single mold. But rather that as we teach, it's like, okay, if you want to do this thing, this is probably how you're going to have to get there. Yeah. Or this is the most likely way you're going to get there, but you don't have to want to do this thing. You might want to do this thing. You might want to do this thing. You might want to do this thing. And even if you do want to do this thing, well, this is the most conventional way you're going to get there, but you could go like this too. You could go like this. You could go like this.
Yep.
You know, I mean, there are just lots of different ways to do it. So I think they all involve hard work. They all involve innate talent. They all involve hard work, and they all involve sacrifice. You know, again, there's no easy way to get there, whether it's playing in the New York Philharmonic or, you know, being the conductor of the Eastman Wind Ensemble or whatever. There's no easy way to get there, but there are different pathways.
I love we're just talking about honesty and awareness of being an educator, because I think the thing Michael was speaking about, the thing that happens very often, our students leave programs with having no true awareness or understanding about what field they're actually going into. So this idea of like, what does networking mean? Why should I go to conferences? Do I touch my instrument every day? Because what I loved about, I mean, my professor, like in undergrad, I studied with the principal flute of the Atlanta Symphony. And so, but she had a family and a husband and like children. And there were days where she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go, you know, away with my kids and da da da. And like, for me, it was so great and important to see her being the fabulous, amazing human being that she was. And also having this, she was mom, right? Like at home, I had many times where I got to like interact with her children. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's not like just Christina. You know, she's not just like Christina to me. Like she is a person. And I think sometimes it's easy as an educator to have this feel like it's a wall. Like, nope, I am this. All you see is me who practices 6-10 hours a day, every single day. My flute's always in my hand, et cetera, et cetera. That's just not the truth. And I think it's a responsibility as an educator to reflect to your students' honesty. And so like whenever I have students and we're, you know, private lessons and all that, I like to talk to them about what's going on. I'm like, oh yeah, like, you know, yesterday I had a date with friends in Portland and it was really fun and I didn't practice because I didn't want to. I needed a day off. So they go, oh, okay, yeah, I should do that too, because they will imitate you. Whether or not you want them to or not, they will absolutely imitate you, because they're gonna think, oh well, my professor never takes a day off, so I guess that means I shouldn't take a day off. And that is the opposite of what you want. You don't want them to feel like they have to do exactly what you do, but it's always like with the reflection of what you're doing, you have to understand how that looks, and on a developing mind, what that will do eventually. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact that as educators, it is also a part of our responsibility, not to just say these things, but what do your students see in you? Because most time it cancels it out. It's like, well, you're saying this to me and this is in your syllabus, but I don't see you actually doing.
Well, and let me piggyback on that in two ways. I think that's really wonderful. On one hand, I think you have earned the ability to take a day off and go to Portland. And so that's also worth, I think, explaining to our students, helping them understand, is that, you know, I mean, I might not practice this thing every day, but it's because I practiced it every day for 5 years back then, and then I built the mastery to allow myself to do it. So I mean, yeah, I think there is as you said, they watch you and they sort of copy you and they think that, but they don't see what it was like before then.
Right.
So they say, oh, that person doesn't really work as hard as I thought. Well, but we sure as heck did,
Exactly.
when we were their age. So I think that's one thing that we also then want to remind them of. The other thing, oh, what was it? Oh shoot. I'll remember later. But there was my teacher.
I was talking about the balance of the family life and the genuine. Is it genuinity? Is that a word? Genuinity. Genuine. We come up with a lot
It
of
is.
fun
It is now.
words.
But I think I think that acknowledging that as educators is important. And so you talked about networking and understanding the field. That's what it was. I think there's a danger in that, because the more that you understand the field, the more you sort of learn to network traditionally, which often is a white male privileged situation. Even if you're not from that, you get good at it and then you sort of perpetuate it. So there is something of that. But that being said, I think it's important to, if you want to change the world, you got to understand the world. I think if you want to change how institutions work, change how a profession works, yes, you can stand outside it and wave your fist and say this is wrong. But if you can learn it well enough to succeed in it, then you have more credibility and, quite frankly, a better chance of affecting long-term change. So I mean, I kind of pushed back on your assertion in a way in order to support it. That I think it is important for students to know how the game works and to learn how to play the game, and then it becomes their responsibility, once they're good at the game, to change the game.
Exactly.
And actually, I think this. I've had a couple students, minority, women of color, we've talked about this, as we kind of go through them establishing themselves in the profession. And I'll just, I'm just going to put this out there. This is what I chose to do. It's not what everyone should choose to do, but it's what I chose to do. And I feel like it was a good strategy for me, and I just put it out there for other people. When I was at Virginia Tech, I wasn't and a new assistant professor out of grad school. I was not really leading in Asian and Korean communities in the band field. Well, first of all, there really was no community back then. We've sort of started it in the last few years, but I wasn't putting my energy into that kind of change. I was putting my energy into getting better as a conductor, and building my skill set, and building my repertoire, and building my pedagogy. And then I moved to another job. I had more years under my belt. I had done more things, and I was sort of in a position where then I had a little bit more freedom. I'm not saying that I won the game, but I got far enough in the game that I had the freedom to then focus less of my energy on advancing myself and more of my energy on trying to build this community. And so what I would never want to do is put the obligation on a young person, especially in a marginalized community, to have to lift up that community while they're also trying to learn the craft. Now, if they want to, there are lots of young people that are bringing so much energy and so much fire and so much passion, and they are changing the world. It really is beautiful and wonderful to behold. But what I chose to do is sort of focus on the work and the world as it was. And then once I had sort of achieved enough sort of security in that world, then I wanted to focus on helping people younger than me or behind me, in my community, as it were. And I think it's not the only approach, but it's an approach I feel good about. And what I want to do then is, there's an old Jack Lemmon saying, in Hollywood, once you get to the top floor, it's your job to send the elevator back down. That once you achieve something, whatever it is, it's your job to then lift up other people and make it a little easier for the next generation, the next people to go through that door, to make the door a little wider. But I think I'll finish this strained metaphor by saying I don't think it is necessarily the best thing to try to widen the door while you're going through it. I think it may actually be more logical to go through the door and then widen it from the other side.
I like how your way was to develop yourself first and really put the energy in, okay, let me make sure my ducks are in a row. And it's all about that experience part. Like I know when we talk to teachers, to new teachers, we're like, well, here is my experience. This is what I did. And I know maybe this doesn't work because I tried it this way. So really taking that time to develop yourself. And then you're like, okay, now I feel comfortable to say, all right, here are some ways to do this. And let's open it up for many people, because why would we want somebody, especially in our minority groups, to go through the same struggles we had? Like that's just, for me, that is just not the best thing in my heart to do. I don't want somebody who is a Black gay man in this field to be struggling the same way I did. And it's like 10 years ago or 10 years in the future. Like, no. Here are some ways that try to make it easier so that then you could end up influencing the next person that comes after you. And then look, of course, it takes time, but look at the people that are now in this room. Look at all the different colors, all the different spectrums that are in this room, because we're not gatekeeping this information. There are some times where gatekeeping works. There are some times where it does not work. And so we have to try to open that door. And I just want to talk to you about how you've become a leader in your community, especially in the band world, and like how is that, now that you've become, you're like, I'm speaking up for my community at every turn that I can. How is that for you now? And have you made your young self graduating from Northwestern proud that you are that person you were looking for back then?
Well, sure. Let me just go back to one last thing from the previous thing before I answer that, which is that I do want to sort of acknowledge the privilege that I have, as a male, as a cisgender male, in a fairly white adjacent skin. There are lots of forms of oppression and discrimination that I have had to overcome and continue to overcome every day. So I'm not absolving the world of that, but for me to say I'm gonna play the game the way it's set up, and then I'm going to try to change it once I get to level X. I just want to acknowledge that, if I'm a Black trans person living in certain parts of the country, I mean, I might not have that luxury. In order to do my work, I might have to deal with the identity and lead with the identity first. So I want to. So then to move on to kind of your second part of your question there, Anthony, is, I mean, I think that because it wasn't that difficult for me professionally, because the single biggest factor, my gender, is one where I'm highly privileged in our field. And then, most of all the stereotypes that are associated with my ethnicity are sort of seen as positives and kind of help me to do that. But I guess what I find so fulfilling about kind of the work we're doing as a community, as an Asian community in the band field, because we're relatively small, is just being able to bring people together and see what happens when people see other people like them and can get to know them. And there's been a lot of energy in this with women. There's been a lot of energy with Black directors, especially. I'm hoping that we can get more Latino, Hispanic communities, and that those of us in other communities can find ways to support them. The LGBTQ community. I mean, this Miss West event, has really become like a very sort of powerful affirmation for that community. So I think, we started maybe 4 or 5 years ago an Asian band director dinner at the Midwest Clinic. I like to throw parties. I like to kind of bring people together. I know a lot of people, and one of the things I like to do is get people I know to know other people I know. So we started hosting this dinner, and this last Midwest, we had like 50 or 60 people. We went to a dim sum place over in Chinatown, and the most gratifying thing about that for me was here we went around and introduced ourselves in this loud room and sort of thing, and I hit the lottery by getting a job in Los Angeles, which is one of the most diverse cities in the world. It has the largest population of Koreans, ethnic Koreans outside of Korea. So I'm the food, my students, a lot of Asian American, Korean American students. I can talk about K-pop with students, on a daily basis. But there are a lot of people that don't live in a city like that and don't teach at a school like that. And there are 2 or 3, 4 people at this event who said, this is the first time I've been around other band directors who look like me in my life. I'm 30 years old. I'm 25 years old. This is the first time I've seen someone else like me. Because while there are a ton of Asians in ensembles, there are very few standing in front of them. So I think that's what's gratifying about it, is that we show that there is a community that's large, and they think that person X is not alone, that there are other people that look like you and maybe have had some of the same struggles you've had, maybe get called some of the same names you get called, maybe have the same assumptions made about them and their musicianship as you do. And then if you know that person and you're connected to them on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, you have someone to reach out to. You have people to hold you, and people that you can rely on, that you can lean on. And for a 22-year-old, for a 25-year-old, for someone who doesn't look like everybody else in a community, to have allies among your people, I think is, it's not essential. But it really helps, and it costs the rest of us who are part of that community, it costs us nothing to be there and to provide that. So and that's going to make it easier for those people to succeed, and for those people to go on and do other things, and for it to and they're the more Black female band directors there are, the more Black female students in bands will say, I can do that. And the more white male students in bands will say, oh, they can do everything I can do. So it now this is not an overnight thing. It's not like, we had a dinner and 2 years later these are long game types of things. These are changes that take a very long time. Playing music by a Black, Asian, Latino composer, and then a student feeling empowered by that. That's not something that translates in 3 years into 5% more this or that. But over time, I think there are more students than in the ensembles who feel like they want to continue doing it. And maybe there are more students who wouldn't have done the ensemble who hear about it and join the ensemble. Then they get the same benefits that we all know are so meaningful from being part of this kind of music making. Little drops in the ocean, but it's also, because they're little drops in the ocean, they don't cost as much.
Right.
We have to sacrifice our whole life to this priority. We just have to make some empathetic and sensible, easy, everyday decisions to help make our genre and our ensembles and our community a little more welcoming.
I agree. And just a quick note, I just love the way you said, because it reminded me of something Cynthia Johnson Turner said was, when she gets hired to do something, and it's like, it was so good because all the female players would be great. It's good to see. And she's like, yeah, but also it's great for all the male players as well, because it's showing that, all right, look, here it is. Everybody can do the same thing, da 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 da. And I think that is so important for all of our students to see that they're, again, this expansive definition of a band director or a musician. It is expansive. It is not one type. It is for us all. And so it has been a pleasure having you on, Dr. Cross. I'm so glad that we worked this out. And for everybody that is listening, please, Dr. Cross, if you have anything for people to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
I mean, probably the best is email. Just my tjcross@ucla.edu. I'm bad at email, so I'll do my best. But feel free to reach out that way. Social media is great. I love connecting with people on social media. I'm just bad at messages on both Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to get an answer from me, email is the best chance, and then probably 2 or 3 emails to help me remember. But then also, I mean, I'm a lot of places. I go a lot of places, and I love talking to people. I got a break in rehearsal. Well, let's talk about. You have a question? Let's do it. I host a conducting workshop every summer. I teach at a couple others. Those are great chances to kind of connect. So I think that's the other thing. If those of us who go a lot of places in the country, it's always nice to see people we know, and it's always nice to meet people we don't know who want to have a conversation, and we'll try to make as much time as we can for those things.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Dr. Cross, for coming on. And everybody, please stay tuned for much more. And we'll leave all types of links down below to get in contact with Dr. Cross. Thank you again for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.